This week, learn how to add file creation and attachment download to our Flask API for buoy data. Welcome to another MetPy Monday. Hello, I'm John Lehman, a software engineer for Unidata. This week we're going to continue extending our Flask API for NDBC buoy data by making a file and then sending that file as an attachment through the browser. So this could be formatting instead of as a JSON blob as CSV or some other format. This is similar to what we get directly from NDBC, except that it's a rather odd fixed width format that's difficult to interpret. That's why we built the simple web service in Siphon to start with. But we're going to take that pandas data frame and turn it into a well-formatted CSV file that then would be easy to interpret. And you could see there could be lots of uses. You could query date ranges or buoy ranges, certain variables. But for now, we'll just get all of the data and send that back as a CSV. So up here at the top, we're going to also import request with a capital R from Flask. And then we're going to import the I/O module. And we'll see why we need those here in just a moment. I'm going to create a function very much like the get variable for all buoys function. So I'm going to copy it and paste. But this one is going to be get data for all buoys. So we're going to get all data for all buoys. I like this because we're doing this time formatting. That's very nice. But instead of just returning a subset of the data, such as time, station, and var name, we're just going to return the whole data frame. Now comes the interesting part, where we need to actually return a CSV file. So the first thing we need to do is what? We need to create the route in our application. So I'm going to use the app decorator, app.route, and my path is going to be current CSV, and methods, we will just leave it as the get method for now, as we haven't talked about post methods yet. I'm going to add some spaces just so it's a little easier to see on the screen. I'm going to create my function. I'll call it all data. Now we don't need to get any kind of request data because we're not passing anything. We're just saying go to the route current CSV. The user isn't giving us variables or buoys. So what's the first thing we need to do? We need to get the buoy data. Get data for all buoys. So what could we do from here? Well, we could return a string representation of the buoy data. That's not that useful. We could do JSON, but we've already worked with JSON. What we need to do is use pandas toCSV method. So buoy data is our data frame dot toCSV. But toCSV writes to a file name. It doesn't give us CSV text. So what we need is some sort of CSV file. I'll call it S here. But we don't want to actually write a temporary file to disk. And since this isn't going to be a very large file, we can actually do it in memory. This is why we imported the I/O module. So I'm going to use the I/O module, the string I/O, and that will give us a file-like object that we can write to and read from. So now we're going to write to that file-like object. And what we're going to return is not simple text, but a capital R response. The first thing is going to be what we're returning. which is going to be s.getValue. That's how you actually get the string representation back out of string IO. You could sort of think of it as a read lines or a read on a normal file. And now we need to specify some headers because we want this to be downloaded as an attachment. And HTTP headers are a whole nother subject, but these are the magic headers that you need to download attachments. Headers, and this is a dictionary. We're going to set something called the content disposition. And this is not the mood of the content, but what is coming back. I've used f-strings here before to create file names that are generated on the fly, say the date or something. But here we're just going to use a generic file name of buoy data because that's what we're getting. So what is the content disposition? It is an attachment. And then we're going to use a semicolon and optionally specify the file name here. buoydata.txt. So now this is going to get the pandas data frame, all data for all buoys, then use pandas 2CSV writer to write that to a file-like object in memory, and then return that file-like object through the user's browser as an attachment. So we'll save that, don't forget that step. We will then fire up our application. All right, so we're on and active. If we go to localhost 500, then we see our buoy API landing page here. And now if we go to current CSV, we see that we have an error here, and this is a copy-paste error. Going back here, we're going to get data for all buoys, but we forgot to remove var name here from the function signature. So let's try that again. All right, and we have one more typo. And this one's not too terribly hard to find, but I do find the debugger output format in the browser a little bit confusing until you get used to looking at it. So, did you catch it when we put it in? Right, and it should have sounded a little weird when I said capital R request. It's actually response, which we used properly later on in the code. So we're going to go up here and change request to response, because it doesn't make sense for something that's getting returned to us to be a request. That is, by definition, a response. Now when we run, we see we still have this same landing page. We could go back here to get rid of that error page. And you see we've downloaded now two files, buoy data and then buoy data 1, which my operating system renamed. So if we open it up and take a look, well, there are data there, and they are comma separated. But what's going on here? We have a comma before station, and then, yes, we have an index. Pandas is writing the index by default. This is not very helpful in this case, because we haven't set the index to be station or something else useful. It's just the zero-base numeric index. So let's get rid of that. Back down to our route in the application, and in 2CSV, we'll simply set index to be false. Now back in the browser, we run our call again. There we go. We have a well-formatted CSV file that can be easily read back into Pandas or any other tool. This could be great if you're querying some of your data and want a file return instead of a JSON response, but don't want to actually create that, save it to a hard disk, and then ship it across the network. We're just creating it in memory and sending it through the browser. I hope that you found this useful, and I'll see you on next week's MetPy Monday.